This series is about respiratory support using the polite heart bubble CPAP machine. And there are 3 lectures in the series. Our lecture this morning, so that I can create time for us to interact and then ask some questions. I will not overrun myself, overpower myself to get into lecture 2 because I want people to understand it. If we can understand the fundamentals, then we will know the reason why we need mechanical support for respiration at all. So I know that the older ones here who are still very conversant with their physiology and anatomy would not mind. But for people who have forgotten much about the physiology, we will have to go to the fundamentals and then build it up from there. So having said that, I want to quickly go down to just to look at the physiology of breathing. Perhaps that is going to help us to get the basis of what we're doing. So breathing and breathing mechanism is a function of the body that is so essential that if it stops, then life stops. And I will meet with people to stop their microphones. All right, so now so many things can lead to a baby being unable to breathe, and we don't just leave that baby on its own, because eventually that baby is going to stop. So a little bit about exchange of gases in humans. No, the lungs. I'm not going to go into the functional anatomy of the lungs because I will consider that every person here the anatomy of the lungs and even the functional anatomy of the lungs. But where the main mechanism of cause is where I want to go straight to, that is the alveoli. We know that the alveoli are microsac, and they fill the distal linings of the bronchial tube. And because there are so many of them, nearly 500 million in human. If you extend them, if you do a kind of mathematical extension, they cover a huge amount of area, and this is what makes it possible for them to allow the body to have adequate exchange of gas in order for the body to have enough oxygen to operate. So the interesting thing about the mechanics of breathing is how the alveoli is structured, like microsacs. And if you try to squeeze the big balloon, you will hear me using the word balloon. Whenever I say balloon, I'm actually referring to the lungs, the lung volume. You know, when you squeeze it, you completely shut down all the alveoli, because these are just like micro sacs with a balloon. So the moment you squeeze it, the sacs will just lock up. And even if you introduce anything inside that sac, any air inside that balloon, without enough air to open up the balloon, the sacs will not open. And breathing only occurs when the alveoli are open, and alveoli can only open up when the balloon is open. So it becomes very essential that when the lung is collapsed, you do not expect any gaseous exchange at all. So the microsacs take up the oxygen contained in the air that come in. So the job of the alveoli is to allow this exchange of gases to take place. So it's actually the work the workhorse of the respiratory system. And then now in between the gaseous exchange, that is oxygen going into the bloodstream at the alveoli, and then the bloodstream releasing the accumulated dioxide back into the alveoli. And exchange.
I'm on a meeting.
Please mute yourself. Okay. So in between that exchange, a lot of other things are happening, and which is what I want to concentrate on, because it is the failure of that exchange that makes us begin to think about assisted breathing. But another thing that is very, very important and essential that we often forget is that while that exchange is occurring, it's not just gaseous exchange that is quite prominent. There's also temperature exchange happening, because the alveoli wall is very, very thin, very, very microscopic. And it is by diffusion that the exchange happens. Because the thing is very wall, the thing that separates the blood vessels that are moving at the far end or the other side of the wall of the alveoli, and the inside of the alveoli where the oxygen-rich air is also moving around. The wall is so thin that now enables this gas exchange by gradient, by concentration gradient to exchange. At the same time, and this is the aspect that is not usually talked about. At the same time, there's also another gradient, and that is temperature gradient. So the temperature gradient is so there is also temperature differential, and that temperature differential is the temperature of the bloodstream and then the temperature of the air that within the alveoli. So there must be also temperature exchange because of the gradient. So there's going to be warmth transferring from the region of high temperature to the region of low temperature. Whether you like it or not, we don't emphasize on it. But I tell you, what happens in adult breathing is, because of the maturity of the brain is able to compensate in case the walls of the alveoli becomes too cold. The brain is able to compensate the temperature of the blood going through the alveoli walls in order not to cause hypothermia to occur. But in the cases of immaturity, where the brain is unable to do that, we know the disaster. I will come to that much later, but I decided to cite Amadi et al. In the work on hypothesis of latrogenic severe hypothermia of internal organs due to extreme prematurity. For those of you who don't know about that paper, you can always read through it, because it's going to assist you to understand why every assisted breathing for premature baby has to be done with understanding. If not, you will kill that baby with cold stress. Right. Let me see what's the next thing now. The three processes of breathing within the alveoli is ventilation, which is the gaseous exchange, and then the diffusion, which is the ventilation, which is the air coming into the lungs. First of all, it has got to come in, and then it's going to be exchanged by diffusion, which I've just explained, and then there's also perfusion, which is because of the movement of the alveoli, making the blood to move around. And I've also told us what some of the things that happen that we don't often pay attention to when the blood is moving around. So I'll still talk more about this as we try to build up on the physiology of breathing. So the tiny alveoli, because there are so many of them, they are able to accommodate quite a chunky size of air per minute, up to 8 liters, 5 to 8 liters a minute. So this understanding will enable you to know what, when you're doing assisted breathing, because I've seen situations where people are assisting babies to breathe, but they are not giving enough airflow. So if you have an idea of a typical size of the alveoli, and you'll be able to know when you are giving the baby inadequate air that would require that will give adequate breathing, in addition to some other things that high volume flow does, which I will be talking about during mechanical ventilation, or maybe assisted breathing proper in the second lecture. So if we bear in mind that the alveoli, altogether, alveoli, the size of the alveoli is really quite huge and able to take even up to 8 liters, then that will tell us what to expect when we're trying to assist the baby to breathe, and when the baby is not able to take in some air. All right. Now, the mechanism itself, we know that what generally happens is I call it the magic of the diaphragm and the chest muscle. The mechanism of breathing is actually initiated by these two structures, these two anatomy in the body. So the chest muscle moves up. I'll use a layman's term to explain this, because few people have come in who are not clinicians. So permit me, because there's a reason for admitting them in. Now, the chest muscle moves up, and it creates negative, when the chest muscle records, it creates negative pressure. And that negative pressure now makes the pressure inside, because when it collapses the lungs, it makes the pressure inside the lungs to become lower than the atmospheric pressure. Then generally, by simple deduction, there's going to be the movement from area of high pressure to area of low pressure. So this initiates air rushing into the lungs, and as air rushes into the lungs will expand, and then that will move the chest muscle. The chest muscle will assist it also to move up, increase the volume of the lungs, and the diaphragm, which works like a spring, will get tensed. Then when it reaches the operational volume, which I'll be talking about later on, it kind of springs back, and that assists the air to be pushed out. But that period of time that elapsed between breathing in and the diaphragm getting down to its recoil elasticity allows enough time for the oxygen in the alveoli that have come in to exchange with carbon dioxide coming through the blood vessels, the capillaries, and then by the time the diaphragm is reaching its a stage of elastic recoil, that exchange has already happened. So the air that is now in the alveoli, they are richer in carbon dioxide. The oxygen it had migrated into the bloodstream. It has also had its temperature changed. The temperature of the gas would have now reached some kind of equilibrium with the temperature of the blood that was passing through. At that particular point, exhalation will occur as the chest muscle and the diaphragm records, and then this will now push the air out, and we have carbon dioxide exhale. And as they are doing that, the pressure drops again, and the whole process repeats itself. So this is how the mechanism works, and and when this process fails, then it becomes impossible for the baby to be sustained. I don't know whether you can see my cursor, right? So the tidal volume is the volume of the lung when no external rest, when there is no panic, when there is no emotion, when at a normal circumstance, the lung volume will alternate within this band we call the tidal volume. But there are sometimes you try to take a deep breath, what we call deep breath, when people tell you breathe in, out, you tend to extend the lung volume by, I hope you guys are seeing my cursor, yes, right. So you can extend the lung volume to take larger volume of air. So this can show you the extent your lung can expand. And sometimes you also get a deeper breathing out, and the lungs can actually compress down to as low as this point, which is this zone, the expiratory reserve volume. You don't, during normal circumstances, you don't get into that. But when you take a race, you run or you do a kind of huge amount of exercise, in terms of the neonates now, when there is obstructed labor, when there is hard labor, then the neonate comes out and the neonate is too weak. It's like somebody running a marathon. You'll be looking at full extension and full acceleration that makes your lung to expand to the extreme and also compress much down to where you get down to the tidal volume. But the way the anatomy functions when everything is all right is such a way that the system does not allow the lungs to collapse completely. We still have a reserve of this residual volume, even if you try to breathe out so deeply. There's still a residual volume that enables easy expansion of the lungs the next time you push air in. Because if you let the lungs collapse completely, then you're going to have a high surface tension that will now require a huge amount of energy to begin to blow up the balloon. I'll give you a quick example. If you have a balloon, maybe a very fresh balloon, your daughter or your little boy brings to you and says, Daddy, Mommy, I want you to inflate this balloon for me. Look, think of the energy you require to blow it up the very first time. It is because the whole thing is collapsed. There is very high surface tension in between the walls. So you need high energy to do that. But the moment you've done it several times and there are some particles of fluid and saliva that's right inside already, it reduces the surface tension. That child can, the next time that child can inflate it. And sometimes you don't allow the child to collapse the balloon completely because the child will run back to you to help. It becomes so soft that there's always a little bit of air remaining. It's something that you can refer to as residual volume. That child can easily blow it back again, but if it collapses completely, there's trouble. And this is what happens in many cases with the very tiny units. When the lung collapse completely, you are really, really in trouble. And that is when you now begin to look for surfactants and all that, just to find a way of reducing the surface tension so that it will be easy to open up the balloon again. So if any person has any problem understanding some of these mechanisms of the lungs opening at different volumes during function, please do call me back to it and I'll be able to explain as much as I can. But it is when this mechanism fails to operate the way we expect it to operate, and the lungs opening the way it should open, that will now begin to find a way of helping that baby helping the baby operate the chest cavity in order to let air in and let air out. So I can always come back to this if any person calls me to it, but I'm going to move on now. Dr. Jimo, are you seeing Domoja Ibitam or something like that? Please find out who that person is and admit the person if he's part of us. Right. Yeah, breathing difficulties now, completely or partially collapsed lung puts the alveoli out of work. This is big trouble. And poor chest muscle activities owing to prematurity or other distress would always initiate this problem. And for those of us working in the newborn department, we do know this because this is regular occurrence, especially with premature babies and babies that had a very prolonged obstructed labor, or maybe babies that are asphyxiated in some way. When they come out, because of much energy they have used, they find it difficult to move their chest muscles, and then the activity fails, and then breathing becomes too difficult for them. And in those situations, we would have to do something about it to assist those babies. But if we understand what is happening, then we'll be able to know what we should do in order to help. And this can easily be made worse if there is a surfactant lack. When there's lack of surfactant, then the problem is that the lungs will collapse all the more, and the surface tension will go up. Things that easily makes this happen is also cold stress. So most of the time, some practice techniques actually worsen the case, makes the case worse, because in the process of perhaps trying to help the child and you're not doing it really very well, you now instigate the chilling down. I like using the word chilling down because that's exactly what it is. Chilling down of the lungs itself. When the lungs get too cold, then it dries up the surfactants all the more. And then you also have much more problem opening the lungs. And then the problem gets worse. And then eventually you may even lose that baby. So there are things that you really have to set your eyes on as you're assisting this baby. Surface tension is very, very important. If you know what will make you to generate a high surface tension, you will avoid it. And one of those things is making sure that the baby is warm. Not just the baby is warm superficially, but the baby is warm right inside the lungs. Maybe later on you can ask me, how do I make the lungs warm? And I will talk about that. But one thing you should realize is that if the lung is very cold, it dries up your surfactant. And when the surfactant is dried up, the lungs collapses all the more. And when the lung collapses all the more, the alveoli are covered. And the gaseous exchange will never take place, and your baby will suffocate to death. So that's the chain of reaction, and it happens that way. Mechanical assistance is required to open the lungs when this happens, and hence the alveoli. So if you can open the lungs, the alveoli will not act, and then the baby will be in trouble. But when you're trying to open up the alveoli, just watch out. Sometimes you concentrate on something and you want to use all that you've got to solve the problem, so that you're opening up another big problem from another angle. Cold, watch out. When you try to open up the lungs, please avoid making the lungs cold, because that would lead to more trouble that you may not be able to handle. Right. Now, I picked up this illustration from that article that I quoted at the beginning of this lecture. That is the latrogenic hypothermia. What happens is that if you are trying to open the lungs and you're pumping in cold air, you may not know it, but what happens is that this neonate has got difficulties maintaining its own temperature. The baby is distressed. So the physiology is really very, very bad at the moment. The baby needs assistance of all kinds. This baby might even be inside an incubator. As you can see this arrow here showing skin temperature is warm. right? But there's a lot of transfer, a lot of mathematical transfer function occurring from the superficial aspect of the neonate, like the skin, across all the dermatological effects, and then down to the internal organs to keep the internal organs warm. So it's actually highly minimal. If you check previous papers, I don't have all the lists handy, but previous research have actually shown that the superficial temperature or the skin temperature is actually at disparity with internal temperatures. And sometimes you can easily measure this by measuring the temperature, the oral temperature of a patient. But for the neonate, the gap is actually wide. It goes in the opposite. It goes in the opposite in the sense that the temperature inside is actually lower than the temperature outside. So what we get here is that you can make the situation even worse. So the internal, the thing, the activities going on inside here would get worse in terms of temperature when we know fully well that the superficial temperature we're getting here is not exactly what is inside. If the incubator, perhaps you set your incubator to run at 36.5, for example, and then you measure the baby axilla temperature, and that gives you 36, maybe 36.8, and you're happy. Yeah, my baby is doing well. And you will not know that deep down, that baby is perhaps at 35, because it's possible. The internal organs of the baby will be at 35. The baby is actually managing, just marginally getting by. And then during that process of marginally getting by, when you are being deceived, because the superficial temperature is showing you 36.5 or 36, and you're fairly happy, 36.5, well, not too bad. But right inside that one you can't measure, the baby is actually managing at 35, the internal organs managing at 35. Then you now try to open up the lungs by pumping in cold air. Perhaps this air you're pumping in is at room temperature. If it is during the night, when the room temperature in Nigeria can go as low as 24 degrees C. Let's see what is happening. This one comes in 24 degrees C, going through the alveoli, 23, 24 degrees C, then the blood in the capillaries, going past the lungs at 35 degrees C. Then there's going to be thermal exchange. Then eventually, the cold air that you're bringing in will chill down the temperature of the blood. Maybe the temperature of the blood will even drop down to 30. Then it begins to distribute all over the body. Then that baby is getting colder. As you're warming the baby superficially, the baby is chilling down inside. That is the guy causing it. And that's why we call it latrogenic hypothermia. And it has killed hundreds and hundreds of babies in Nigeria and other African countries because of that thing they call improvised bubble CPAP, or any other CPAP that cannot give baby warm air. People do often say that the Polite Heart bubble CPAP is a magic machine. It's not any magic machine. It's simply a machine that tries to mimic what we think should be physiological in the situation where the neonate that is unable to do so many other things, including temperature balancing, within the system. But where it is concerned, we try to the machine try to do some things to be able to remove conditions that wasn't the case. So this is basically what Polite Heart does. Polite Heart allows you to consider the condition of the baby, the age of the baby, and then set an air temperature, so that the baby is not just relying on the thermal environment of the incubator. The baby is actually relying more on the internal warming of the organs. So it's not magic. sometimes if this lecture doesn't happen, I don't usually have the time to explain the little things. And just this alone, just this mechanism of making sure that the internal organs are kept at optimal temperature, far better than even the skin temperature. That is where the magic lies. And if you want to kill any baby very quickly, introduce cold stress. That baby dies. Cold stress will shut down every other thing you're doing on that baby. Even if you are the best doctor in the world, the moment the baby is chilling down, you aren't going to succeed, never. And if you want to win the game, put those organs at comfortable environment. The organs will fight the sickness, and the baby will recover. So the magic of Polite Heart lies here. It's not just sending in warm air, but sending appropriate warm air, because you will determine what is appropriate depending on the condition of the baby. So the Polite Heart allows you to set the correct temperature that will ensure that the internal organs are kept at optimal thermal environment, and they will all function very well and help you to defeat the problem. So when you're doing assisted breathing, this should actually, the moment you are succeeding with your gaseous exchange, the next monster that if you ignore at the peril of your patient is temperature exchange. And that is why a lot of babies die on Pomani. Maybe I'm giving you guys the secret now, for those of you who have used Pomani. And it really baffles me that Americans have refused to figure that out. Or is it that they figured it out, or because they want more Africans to die, they don't want to do anything about it? Right. Okay, I'll move on. But you can call me back to it if you need me to say more about that. So why Polite Heart? The Polite Heart CPAP was actually developed based on what was observed in the clinic. So it's not like somebody jumping into bandwagon. For so many years, the field, not here in the UK, where we have all kinds of sophistication, but this is all about my work across the African continent and seeing highly impoverished babies and over-labeled doctors and nurses trying to save them. And then building from there a device that will try to incorporate many of the capabilities that you require in a very poor situation to assist the baby to survive. It was a huge task developing this device and developing it in such a way that we are able to trade off costs so that it will be affordable, not just the device itself being affordable, but also the operation of the device being affordable. Because you agree with me. So, right. If a unit gathers some financial strength and maybe buys a ventilator, a mechanical ventilator, that is probably not a Polite Heart, but another mechanical ventilator. Called mechanical ventilator, but non-invasive ventilator. I wanted to say, not the invasive ventilators, but non-invasive ventilator like the Polite CPAP. Before, I would say that the Polite Heart simplified the thing so much that many manufacturers now are having a rethink. But going by what Nigerians and Africans have had over the years before 2017, when we introduced the Polite Heart, it was like another trouble of an invasive ventilator, where you buy this with a big amount of money. I know that Professor Bello will still remember, or those of you who attended NISOM 2017 in Ibadan. I'm sure you will remember an organization called Supreme Meditech attended that meeting in Ibadan with a ventilator from this company in New Zealand, that is Fish and Pickle. Fish and Pickle was the only trustworthy CPAP that Nigerians could use. But you can't find it anywhere. I'm sure that Calabar did not even have it. Why? Because it was expensive. 6.5 million. And mechanical respiratory support was for the children of big men, people who could go to hospitals where you can find this. But even if you are able to purchase it, for goodness sake, the consumable will cost you 6,000 for each baby. So that's the point I'm trying to make. It's not just getting the expensive equipment. What about the consumable for running it? Will the ordinary poor parents that we have in Nigeria, can they afford it? 6,000 consumable to run one patient on Fish and Pickle. So it's they could really better use the equipment, maybe in Australia and maybe the other developed countries where the strength of their currency could carry it. But in Nigeria, it's an impossible. And that is why, that was why the improvised purple CPAP became so popular in Nigeria, killing babies, giving babies, killing them of cold stress, and those of them that are dying of ROP are dying of ROP across the entire country. If we have been people who pay great attention to numbers, I'm sure that we will alarm to realize how many babies that die in our hands due to poor respiratory support. Both those dying of cold stress are iatrogenically initiated by this support. They die of cold stress because you think that you're warming them superficially, but they are chilling down inside, and eventually they will die of extreme hypothermia, and you don't even know it. And then you coupled with so many babies who will soon go blind because of ROP due to poor FiO2 of oxygen being delivered. I'm not coming to that now. That will be subject of the next level of lectures. But generally, what I'm trying to emphasize here is the importance of having it and having it right, and making use of a device that can easily do the job without too much of expenses. A device that is cheap enough, and a device that is able to mimic the things that we want it to do in order to keep the baby alive, and then eventually a device that will not require too much money for its consumables, so that even if it gets to the point where the mother or the father runs away, one of us can easily dip our hands in our pocket to go and buy a cannula at 300 naira or 250 naira, and that baby is on. So that is what I think that is appropriate for low and middle income countries of the world, and that is what my office at Imperial College does, pushing boundaries of healthcare survivability in these poor countries. So it is essential that we have to think about a device that is able to do this for us, a device that is able to adequately open up the lungs for us, so that we are able to engage the alveoli to do the work, and avoiding the alveoli or avoiding the lungs to collapse completely, and then be able also to keep the walls of the lung, the internal walls of the lung, adequately warm enough so that we will indirectly be warming the bloodstream right deep down. So it is very important that we keep the internal walls of the lungs warm enough so that we so that we will, or we are indirectly warming the body of the neonate just by assisting the baby to breathe through the blood capillaries. The blood are passing through the capillaries as they're exchanging the oxygen with the carbon dioxide they've got. The bloodstream also pick up higher temperature in exchange, and then they'll circulate through the body, and internally all the organs are being warmed, and all the organs are performing optimally. And you see that baby will get well very quickly. Every other organ will be responding as you're giving adequate oxygen. I'm going to stop at this point now, and the next time we will now look at the polite heart system itself, and look at the components of the polite heart that try to provide all these requirements that are mentioned that are needed for the lungs to operate optimally to be able to keep the baby alive. Yeah, I don't know if there's any question or because beyond this is going to be lecture 2. So, Dr. Jim, I'm handing back over to you. Okay, Dr. Memi, who wants to say something? Please, you have the floor. Turn on yourself.
Yeah. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Professor.
Somebody, good morning, and thanks for this. This is really great, and I've learned a lot myself. And it's curious, that this concept of warming and cooling the body hydrogenically has been translated into some technology that is going to make a change. But I was wondering, is there at any point you thought that the mouth-to-mouth breathing, which transfers warm air from humans to human, could have been successful because of this concept of warming the inside? Thank you.
Sure, there is acceptable physiology, if I would say, with what you said, because if you're doing mouth-mouth, yes, because the air coming from you will also be at the standard temperature of your body, which is for adults, and then depending on the and your physical activities, there's a possibility that the air you're breathing out will be at a temperature between 35.5 and perhaps 37, depending. So, yeah, it will work, but for how long? You see, what we are talking about here is sustained breathing. So it will work, but it will not be adequate for the neonate who wants a prolonged and sustained breathing. And it's not something you do for 30 minutes and it solves the problem. The baby will have to be under that condition for quite some time. And it's not just the warmth that we want to achieve. We also want to achieve adequate gaseous exchange. So we will try to maintain the lung volume, the tidal volume. We will try to maintain, which I will be talking about in the next lecture. How does polite heart do it? Because all these things play a huge amount of role, because our primary goal is to ensure adequate gaseous exchange for a prolonged period of time until baby recovers. But in the process of doing it, we want to keep baby warm. So, but for human mouth-to-mouth, that won't be able to last for such a long time before you get tired, and it might not be sustainable. That's it. I don't know if I answered your question.
Because yes, very good. Thanks a lot. No, I wasn't suggesting that it's an alternative. I was just thinking that the physiology looks like there's some similarity.
Yeah.
So that's
okay. Professor Cindy wants to talk.
Okay. I hope. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, Prof. Clearly.
I want to ask.
I can hear you, Prof.
Professor Hippolyte, what is the impact of the temperature from hippo heart or polite heart on the surfactant? Because I know if it is too cold, I mean a cold temperature will affect surfactant negatively. And if it is too high, it may also affect it negatively. So what is the impact of this temperature thing on the surfactant, which is supposed to maintain the PEEP? So also place a PAP on the PEEP, that's PEEP.
Thank you, Professor. And what we do know is that cold temperature will make the surfactant more ineffective. In fact, the general term we use is the natural surfactant will dry up if cold stress sets in within the walls of the lungs. So trying to keep the lungs warm will make the effective. And when I say warm now, it has to be adequate. The physiological temperature is not making it hot. That's why I talked about appropriate temperature, and that is based on the condition of the baby, because depending on the age of the baby and the situation, you would have to decide at what temperature you will have to set your air, so that when the air is within the alveoli, the temperature of the air will have to be within physiologically acceptable level of 37, not more than 37. And that helps your surfactant to work very well. Even if you introduce the surfactant, if you must do surfactant administration, it makes it to last for quite a long time, even until the time the baby recovers. The natural surfactant, when cold stress sets in, will not last, and that baby will die off. And if you do not want that to happen, one of the things that you have to set your eyes or set your mind into doing is to ensure that lung does not grow cold, so that you don't lose the natural surfactant, and that the baby will be able to produce as the system grows up.